So, hey friends, this is me, Vishwas Nair. I'm the host of this Community Dude podcast. This is the first episode that I'm recording with Aditya Oberai. And trust me, as an impact, world needs an arena of communities. I think it's not just boxing up the communities, boxing up the infrastructure and saying, you know what, we are here to influence, but it's also about impacting at scale. I think Appride has been something which is doing phenomenal in terms of evangelizing what developer tool needs to be and how an open source technology can make a lot of impact. And I'm with one of the community dudes, Aditya from Appride, and he's going to give a lot of insight about how this entire tech stack of what an open source technology has to offer to the world and how to evangelize right in the world that is filled with a lot of complex tools and puzzles that is yet to be demystified. And thank you, Aditya, for being on the show. It's a lot, my friend.
Thank you so much, Vishwas. Really happy to be here. I think that introduction was anyway a lot better than what I could have come up with. So thanks for that. But yeah,
Yeah, man.
hi everyone.
Let's
Aditya here.
let's get it started. Let's get it started, man. Man, there is a lot of hush hush that's happening in the market. There is a lot of things that goes wrong. You know what? DevRel is this, DevRel is that. But what is the definition of DevRel that you have defined for yourself through your journey? Because every DevRel has a story to say, every product has a story to say, and it's the job of a DevRel to do that. And what's the definition of DevRel today?
That's a really good question. Um, Vishwas, you don't mind me cross questioning you, no, do you? Along with this.
Yeah. I mean, don't worry
Perfect.
about that. Yeah.
Okay. So, can you give me a few examples of companies you think cater to developers, particularly in the world today?
I think every tool and every technology is
Can you
catering
give
to
some examples?
examples. Azure, they're making it much more feasible for a company or an organization which is in the highest form to understand, okay, this is what is happening. I think a
Yeah,
company like
like their audience, they're catering to
yeah,
developers, right? Any other examples? Any companies you think that are doing that?
I think to me, if you ask me as a security guy, it's Splunk, it's New Relic, it's I think you can also say Devtron. Devtron is doing pretty amazing in terms of developers. We are giving that inclusive feeling of, you know what, it's just UI and
Yeah,
UX and click. That's it for you to just get your DevOps right practices.
that's very true. I think, along with that, if we take a few more examples, companies like MongoDB, you've got Sentry, you've got AWS, of course, you've got uh, that. I mean, that list can go on and on, right? AppRate, of course, is there as well. Uh, let's go 10, 15 years back now. If you think about companies that were there 10, 15 years back, how many of these names do you think you'd be fitting in the list? How many of these companies do you think were around catering specifically to developers 15 years back?
I don't I don't think so. Every company had an business propaganda, right? Everybody would like, you know what, if it works in their production, because back then production was just like, it's not VM, it's just mainframes or something like that, and people were already feeling it complex. So don't worry about that. It's a completely different story about what we had to think about developers back then. I think today it's mature.
That's true. It was a very different world. Yes, absolutely. More companies were focused on catering to businesses. As we went forward, you saw more companies catering dedicatedly to consumers. And it's only more recently, majorly in the last 5 years, 7 years, that we now have a lot of companies catering to developers. In the past, maybe you had a Microsoft, an Oracle, someone like that doing it. But the world's changing today, right? It's like now in today's world, we have so many more companies catering to developers. Now, Vishwas, think from your company's perspective once. Your audience is developers, right? They're your consumers, they are your customers, they are your audience. Um, so if you want to go out and help enable them, help onboard them, help essentially ensure that they can work with your products and um, they can build with them and effectively, I mean, that is your business, right? You are, since they are your customer, in order for that to happen, you need to ensure you can cater to those people as well. So, would you not need someone who can not just communicate, who can not just engage, but also educate from a technical standpoint? Someone who can relate with these challenges, collaborate with these people, solve their problems. That's effectively what DevRel
That's true.
does.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Man, that was a very broad explanation that we had just to think about what is an impact that a developer advocate can bring on the table. I think the challenges is all about understanding the market. I think it's all about.
Absolutely. And the thing is, to understand what this is supposed to achieve, you do actually need to take a few steps back to get a larger view, right? Um, and the reason for that is because when we look at social media or areas like that, often we see very specific parts of it. All right, like just for example, I'm a football fan. You understand football as well?
Yep, I understand
Yeah,
football, basketball,
perfect.
tennis.
So in football, you've got your defenders, you've got your keeper, you've got your mid, you've got your strikers, right? When you've got your strikers and your forwards, they focus at the goal, right? Their job is to ensure that they're able to maintain that possession and take the ball forward and score a goal. So when they're playing a match and this match is being telecasted, the cameraman, as it goes up there, points towards the goal. So you get that one particular view of what's happening at this moment, right? You don't always see everything else that is there around it at that moment. So a lot of what we see and what we hear about DevRel is just the same way, right? Because while we are the actors on the field within our companies, within the communities, we're also people who showcase it. And these moments we see on social media are just how you would see a cameraman pointing towards a certain player as they're going to score a goal. You don't see everything else that's happening in play out aside from that specific place. You're probably not going to see your defenders build the offside trap or start positioning or man marking in case there's a counter attack, right? But all of that is happening as well. So it's the same thing with DevRel. You see some things happening on the stage. You see some things visible on social media, but that's just one part of it that is showcased. And in order to understand it, you need to really take a few steps back and look at the overall bigger picture.
That's true. That's true. And what has been the challenge for you since you passed out, came into the industry? There at least been a bigger challenge of understanding what industry needs today, and catering to that needs. I think probably it requires a huge amount of experience that has to be given up in the market. Like, you need to go back to the developers. Like I do that when I change the organization. When last organization, completely a different product, good, fine. But now it's a different story. I have to deal with the community of engineers, not just getting the leads to the sales team or the marketing. It's also about, can we bring in the product community fit? Like, can our product be perceived the right way? There is always a challenge on that. So what has been the challenge to you when you think about community that is evolving, and also when you are getting part of it? So what has been the challenge for you right now?
So it's actually interesting that you bring this up because here's one thing that a lot of people, at least when entering, don't think about, and that is um, when, like, at least for someone who's just entering the industry or someone who's potentially just getting is still in their early stages. We like to see our communities as independent of our audiences and market. Um, and that isn't actually true. We need to effectively realize that when you're working with a company for this purpose, at the end of the day, your community is there to assist you in solving your business needs as well. At the end of the day, that is a part of the purpose of why you focus on sustaining them, right? Whether that is by feedback, whether that is by with to help support, whether that is to help evangelize, whether that is to actually whether they are your customers and you are effectively maintaining these groups, Your community is a part of your business goals, and it is very, very necessary to realize that. That is something that takes a little time to understand and realize, right? But it is very, very important to do so. And the second thing is, at the end of the day, we might think of the DevRel industry as its own, and that's a very fair thing, to be honest. It's a domain there, but we work within the technology industry as an overall. Um, the work within DevRel is not separated from that, and that's something to remember, because for a lot of people, the engineers are
DevRel
one
is a
side, the
software
DevRel is
engineering.
other, product is somewhere. It's not like that, right? At the end of the day, you are catering within the business world, within the same world, and it's very necessary to, at least when you're getting started, to realize that, because if you're unable to understand what your business needs, your goals for DevRel will always remain flawed. Like, think about this. We like every once in a while, whenever layoffs start, this whole thing starts up, right? Like DevRel might be the first people to go, and some places you actually see them losing their jobs earlier than others as well. The reason this happens is because, forget individuals, even companies in this date, not every single one of them have actually figured out why they need a DevRel team. They build the team first, then decide what goals they need to solve with them, which is the absolutely wrong way of going about it. You need to understand how it impacts your business and whether your business needs it, and then go forward accordingly. And this becomes especially tricky for candidates, because as a candidate, if you don't know how to evaluate that and you're in these processes, you are that much more likely to put yourself in trouble going forward, um, than you would if you did understand and if you were able to recognize why the business needs you as well. And that it doesn't just correlate with your stability of career, it also correlates with the kind of work you will be doing, right? Because if my organization knows why they need DevRel before they start hiring, if we have some goals, it is easier for me to understand what I will be doing there. A lot of organizations, you kind of see DevRel doing and going entirely haywire and doing this and that, and things that you feel might not be relevant or not, and that happens because these goals aren't well defined beforehand, right? Like, for example, when I entered Apprite, at least I had some semblance of where and what challenges we were there to solve, because my founder understood the impact that DevRel could make. He had that in mind. They were working on some initiatives for that already. Now, had that not been the case, had they been like, we have to get someone for DevRel and then decide what DevRel needs to do after, that could have been extremely problematic. So it's very necessary for the organization to understand what they want to achieve from their DevRel team first before, and it's very necessary for a candidate to be able to evaluate that. Because if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for failure for not just a small amount of time, but that could effectively have a domino effect later on as well.
That's true. That's true. And last question about how community has been a most integral part of everybody's life. How community can be an integral part of an industry today. Because when I talk to some of the developer advocates and they say me, you know what, Vishwas, we saw somebody in the community writing an article, and I was awestruck because we never imagined our product could have had also done that. And it's not there in the product documentation itself. That means it's evolving, it's still challenging. There's a lot of things that we don't know. There are a lot of things that you don't know in your same product. So how is community as an arena going to help engineering practices evolve, industry evolve over a course of time? Because it's not a one day thing that devil comes, you know what, content aega, email campaigns, this and that, newsletter goes out, but it's also giving back to the community. How can you get back from the community as well? So how is DevRel going to manifest the new era of engineering? Like, I just wanted to know that because this is going to be a common question for all the DevRels that I'm going to interview right now.
So, okay, this might sound slightly controversial, but I think before understanding how these groups can impact, you need to ask the questions about why a company or why a product needs them in the first place. And this has nothing to do with whether communities or DevRel are good or bad, but whether a company actually needs them. Um, Ideally, communities particularly help organizations which have a heavy focus on individual users as well. There are a lot of organizations that don't, which isn't necessarily bad, right? If you're heavily catering to enterprises, for example, you're gonna have a network of partners of that sort. Sure, you could create a community to cater to them, but that's not necessarily gonna add value. It's just a means of engagement, right? Whereas if you have a more individual catered solution, communities become a great place to bring people together, to collectively achieve some amount of research, to collectively engage and collaborate and create more communication within, right? So it's very important to actually start evaluating before we talk about how this can solve a challenge, about whether it's necessary or not, because the challenges it solves aren't very abstract, right? Like, we talk about feedback. It's a great place to get feedback for the product. We talk about uh, bringing to people and together with a common goal. If they appreciate the product, then they've decided that while they're joining the community typically, or at least in not too late of a stage. So you've got users who care about your product and they're gonna assist you in your growth activities as well, hopefully. But I mean that does add, right? If you need to get if you need help with supporting people around, like I know with our community we've got some amazing contributors who continuously just help solve doubts because they like the product, so they just like helping others with it, right? It's a great place not just to get support, but also if there are common challenges people are facing, it's a great place for them to bring them up so you can solve them for them as well, right? So there are different ways by which it's going to give back anyway. Those ways are still more apparent, but the question that really needs to be asked is whether your company even needs this in the first place. Because if, for example, you are a dev tool, but you're heavily catered at businesses only, and you're not much of an individual tool, then chances are you could create a community, but it's not going to add as much value to you. It might, but then again, it might not, right? Because your audience is very different. Your customer base is very different. So it's necessary to evaluate that before you kind of jump to understand this impact. And that's a question more people need to be asking because unfortunately, a lot of people don't ask this question, right? Like DevRel becomes synonymous with community, which is nice at times, but it's necessary to realize that it doesn't have to be as tightly coupled as it might seem, right? Like at the end of the day, when you talk about developer relations, you're talking about engaging with developers. You're talking about engaging with individuals, and those individuals could be within your networks, could be on certain forums. They don't necessarily have to just be collected in a community. So communities are a part of it, but that's not the, again, not the entire um, board.
True, that's true. I think don't worry about it. It's just
Yeah.
an insight that is obviously required because I think engineering practices are going to evolve. To me, like if you ask me how and how Thanos was actually formed, because it was because of community of engineers having a
Feedback.
brainstorm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a feedback. I always say this definition for Kubernetes. It's a kubectl command. It's coming out with years of distributed computing experience practices right in front of you in its form factor. Do not abuse it. I obviously say that because not everybody requires Kubernetes, but everybody on the subpage wants to get inside Kubernetes. I think that's a challenging part about how influence this technology can also make. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
whole point about community making an impact in the way we perceive technology. I think thank you so much, Aditya, for such great insight. Man, you know, he's junior to me by the way. He's 1 year junior to me, and he has given such great insight. And I just love the fact that young folks like him, like they can really drive anybody. Like they can drive an engineer who is 20 years in the industry, and they can look back at us, and that is what is making me fascinated about the world of developer advocacy. I think a lot of things needs to change, a lot of things needs to evolve. And see you soon, my friend. Any talks, any meetups will just be hanging out to them. Sure, my friend. Let's end the recording.